This is Vaughn with Spirit of Health. Today we are going to show you how to make a basic sauerkraut. This is one of the most basic fermented foods all throughout history, and there's actually a great long history to sauerkraut. This is also a critical part of the GAPS diet, a critical part of healing the intestinal tract in your gut. Sauerkraut has been around for thousands of years. Actually, the Romans wrote about preserving cabbage using a fermentation type of a process. What's interesting is Captain Cook actually used to carry it in his ships along with limes because they knew it prevented scurvy because it was high in vitamin C. Immigrants would actually bring them over in barrels and barrels of sauerkraut over to the United States when they first settled here because they knew that it prevented sickness and it prevented disease. So there's been a lot of history behind sauerkraut, and a lot of cultures knew the powerful benefits of sauerkraut. Now it's often eaten with hot dogs and brats. It's famous in Germany, of course, eaten often traditionally with pork and frankfurters and sausages and different things like that. So people, when they hear of sauerkraut, that's probably what they think of. Now I will admit, when I got into health and I first started eating sauerkraut, I really didn't like it. I did not like it. And I will say now, it's like candy. I can eat it right out of the jar. I absolutely love it. And I hear that from people over and over and over again because your taste buds change. It's a very sour taste, but it's so powerful and so healing for the body that the body will soon learn to love it because it really does want it. Now, the reason sauerkraut is so powerful is a couple of things. It has live living enzymes in it, and it has live living bacteria in it. These are called lactic acid bacteria. So what we're going to be doing here is called a lactofermentation. These lactic acid bacteria actually come from the soil. I have recently discovered how powerful soil organisms are. They're beneficial bacteria that are very helpful for our gut and for our immune system. So your children should be playing in the dirt and you should be playing in your garden, absolutely. But this head of cabbage right here actually has a lot of living bacteria right on the head of cabbage. And what we're doing is we're taking advantage of those organisms and we're going to preserve them and use them to heal our own bodies. Now, some of the benefits of eating sauerkraut are it's very easy to digest because of the process of the enzymes and the probiotics that help with the digestion. It's going to actually improve your digestion and help you to process your nutrients better, and it actually is loaded with vitamins and minerals. Some of the most common, well-known ones would be your B vitamins, vitamin C, and vitamin K. Those are all very beneficial nutrients needed. It also is known to reduce blood sugar levels, and it's just very powerful for a number of reasons to heal your body. So one other point I want to mention about the sauerkraut, if you're getting ready to try it, maybe you're kind of new to it, is if you have diarrhea or constipation. Now, if you have diarrhea, you want to be very careful. Cabbage can stimulate bowel movements, and it can be, I don't want to say dangerous, but it can be a concern for people with diarrhea and kind of stimulate that diarrhea, irritate the bowels. If you have constipation, on the other hand, it's actually fantastic. It is fantastic to help with increasing and improving regularity and bowel movements, especially if you are constipated. So the way we're going to make this today is we're going to actually make this with salt. Now there's a number of different ways you can culture this cabbage and make your sauerkraut. Salt, the traditional method. We are going old school. It's the original way things were preserved with salt. Meat was cured with salt, and a lot of these vegetables were cured with salt. And so we're going to use salt. It's the ancient way to do it. Now, there are other ways to do it. A couple I'm going to mention is one is whey, and we always have whey on hand to ferment things. And we also have culture starter kits. This one's from Caldwell. There's other ones by other companies, but this makes it really easy to get a lot of healthy bacteria right into the fermented food immediately. Now, the cool thing about salt is the way salt works is the salt actually gets into the cabbage, and what it does is it helps to promote the growth of these healthy bacteria, these lactic acid bacteria, and what it does is it pushes out or does not allow any pathogenic organisms to grow in the food, in the cultured food. So salt is a fantastic way to do it. Now, again, if you just want to do it the safe way or the easier way, or a way that's going to just guarantee you won't have any issues, you can add the whey, you can add a culture starter. It's just a way to add a lot of cultures early in the process. So let's go ahead and get started making this. What we're going to do, the first thing we're going to do to make our sauerkraut here is I'm going to start working on this head of cabbage. I'm going to cut off the end here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take off these large outside leaves right here. And I'll tell you what we're going to do with these later. I'm going to get some of these larger leaves off around the outside here. Kind of try to keep them intact, try to keep them whole. Okay, now that we got a few of those off, I'm going to slice this directly in half. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take the core out real quick, like that. Core this other side. All right. Okay, now I'm just going to cut this into really thin strips. Okay, I'm just going to do one half at a time. And what we're going to do is we're going to put this cabbage in our bowl here, and we're going to knead it. We're going to massage it, and we're going to add salt. And what the salt does is it actually releases the juices of the cabbage. So I got half of my cabbage here, and this just takes a while, so I'm going to just start with half of it because it's quite a bit, and I'm going to add just about half of my salt. And I'm just going to start massaging this, and just keep breaking it down and breaking it down, and after a few minutes, you'll see that the juices really start to get released from this cabbage, and you just keep massaging it for probably a good 10 to 15 minutes. So give me a few minutes to get this all massaged up nice and pretty, and we'll come back and show you how to finish the process. Okay, welcome back. We have kneaded our cabbage and we've made it nice and juicy. And now we're going to make Sauerkraut. Sauerkraut means sour cabbage. You just had a nice little German lesson there. So, now that we have this all ready, look how juicy that is. Look at how that's just the salt made that happen. Made that beautiful, nice, juicy brine. So it makes its own brine. It's really important that you expose as much of the cabbage as you can, the surfaces of the cabbage, to the salt. That's what's going to really help get a nice, good ferment in there. So I also wanted to mention that, again, if you wanted to use something besides the salt, you could use the whey. And what you do with the whey is you use a half of a cup per quart, or you can use the culture starter, and those are just other methods to do it. But again, we're just going to stick with the salt. Now this is on page 145 of the Internal Bliss Cookbook, and there's a whole list of other different herbs and other things you can add to your ferment just to make it nice and tasty. So we are going to go ahead and we're going to start making this sauerkraut. The first thing I need to do is I need to put it in my jar right here. And I got this nice big gallon jar, and this is actually specifically a fermenting type of a jar. Now you could use a quart-sized jar like a mason jar, but they say to get a good ferment, you want at least a half a gallon sized jar. So this is actually an entire gallon sized jar. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start adding this cabbage in there. Man, that's so drippy. It's amazing. And what I'm going to do is I got some caraway seeds. I'm just going to sprinkle a few caraway seeds in there as I go, just to kind of get that all mixed in there nice. Now I just used 1 medium head of cabbage. I mean, I could have used probably, I think for this recipe it's about 3 pounds. I really could have filled this jar up and made a lot of cabbage, but I'm just going to make a small batch here. And that is totally up to you, how big or small of a batch you want to make. And look at all that liquid that's left over here. So I'm just going to get all this, oh, a little more caraway seeds. And then let me just get all this liquid in here. Nice. Okay, so I have that in there. And I got this little tamper. I'm just going to kind of tamp this down. Now the reason you tamp it is because you actually want to get all of the cabbage underwater. Why do you want it underwater? Well, you want it underwater because the lactic acid bacteria thrive in an environment without oxygen, so an anaerobic type of an environment. So if you push all this underwater, what you do is you don't allow pathogenic organisms the opportunity to get to the vegetable you're fermenting. So it actually protects what you're fermenting. So I'll just top that off with a few caraway seeds. So you see most of that is kind of tamped down under there. That looks pretty good, but I just want to show you that what you can do is you can add just a little bit of water to top it off. Again, just to make sure that everything's covered in water. That's what's going to keep pathogenic organisms out. It's going to keep it from molding. Now a key to this water is I added some sea salt to this water, about a teaspoon here, to a pint. And that's because you don't want to dilute it. You really need the salt. The salt is a critical component to this process. So that's plenty. The water is well over the vegetables, so that's not going to mold or anything like that. Now this lid we have, again, this is a special fermenting type of a jar. So this lid that I put on here is specifically designed, I just fill it with water to this fill line here. It's specifically designed to pull carbon dioxide out of the container. So it's kind of a no-brainer way to make sure everything ferments properly. Now again, you wouldn't have to use this. You can buy these jars on fermenting type of websites, but you could also use your mason jar, like this mason jar here. Remember these cabbage leaves I had from before? So if you had a mason jar, what you would do is you'd stuff it in here real tight. I mean, you just stuff that cabbage in there. You want the brine, again, to cover everything. You'd want to leave a good inch or more at the top, and you'd actually roll these cabbage leaves up, and you'd stuff that in the top, and then you'd put your lid on real nice and tight. And you just keep that really tight in there, and then you could get a good ferment that way. But we like using the fermenting jars. That just seems to work really well. Now that this is done, what you're going to do is you're going to put it at room temperature, so that's 70 to 78 degrees, in a cool, dark place. So you don't want to expose it to any other temperatures besides room temperature. You don't want to expose it to sunlight. A cool, dark place for 5 to 7 days is about all it takes for this to set up shop and be fermented and ready to go. After your 5 to 7 days, after it's fermented, you want to put it in the refrigerator, or you could put it in like a cool cellar, and you want to keep it refrigerated. Now in the refrigerator, it will literally last for months. Months and months and months. Some people say even years, but we know that it'll last a long, long time. But it's really important you don't expose it to bacteria. So you want to use a lot of clean utensils. Use clean utensils every time you get in and out of the jar, and just make sure you don't expose it to any bacteria, because that can cause it to mold. Now how do you know if it's bad? Well, it's bad if it's moldy, if you see fur growing on it, if it's slimy, if it's really smelly in a bad way. You know, a lot of people think fermented foods smell anyway, but if it smells rotten, you pretty much know it's bad. And then what you do is you just put it in your compost. It's a vegetable, so you can compost it, put it on your garden. It'll give a lot of nutrients to your garden or to your composting soil. The last point I want to make on this, and I didn't tell you this from the beginning, but it's critical that when you make this, you want to use filtered water. You cannot use tap water. It's got to be a good quality filtered water. You got to use organic cabbage, or any vegetables you're fermenting. You want them to be organic. That is very critical as well. And you want to use real quality sea salt. Sea salt's a critical component to this, so it has to be a quality sea salt as well. Now you can ferment really anything. We've done videos on fermenting carrots, fermenting green beans. You can ferment any kind of vegetables. Ferment your jalapeno peppers. Ferment your little cherry tomatoes that you got. Okra, whatever. You can get the benefits of not only the nutrients from the vegetable, but also the lactofermentation, the good bacteria. And just ferment everything because it's so powerful for the immune system and so healing for the gut and so critical for this GAPS diet. So I just thank you for watching. We just ask that this food would bless you as it's blessed us, and so many thousands of other people have learned the powerful benefits of fermented foods. From our kitchen to yours, this is Vaughn Lawrence with Spirit of Health. Until we meet again.